everyone. We are now going to be talking about the appendicular skeleton. So if you're watching these in the order, well, you can watch them in whatever order. There's an ideal order, but it's fine. I just finished recording the axial, so now we're going to move on to the appendicular. So I'm assuming you're probably watching them in that order, but either way, it doesn't matter. It's fine. So let's just jump right in. So the appendicular skeleton, you can, like I mentioned before with the intro one, so the appendicular are the appendages, your arms and your legs. So it's all of the bones that are in your arms and your legs, and also the bones that attach your arms and your legs to the axial. So like as a good example, we've got the bones of the arm. Also, you have your scapula back here and your clavicle. Those are not part of your arm, but they attach your arm like to the main trunk of your body, right? So those are still considered part of the axial skeleton. I'm sorry, appendicular skeleton. So moving along, the next couple bullet points on the next slide, kind of what I already said. We call those areas a pectoral girdle. And then similarly on the leg, the pelvis is not part of the leg, but it attaches the leg to the axial skeleton. We call these two areas girdles. To be clear, a girdle is not the name of a bone. If I have a bone out and I say, identify this bone, you would never put girdle. Girdle is just a term to reference, like, here's a group of bones that kind of have a function, but it's not the name of the bone, right? The name of the bone would be scapula, something like that. Moving into the next section, the upper limb. So we're going to start with the arm, and then we're going to go to the leg. So there are three kind of areas for the upper limb or the arm. We've got, the arm, the forearm, and then like the hand and the wrist, right? So we'll go through these, see what we need to know. So the first one is the humerus. The humerus. Now let me see. I've got. Here's the humerus right here. So you can see it on this individual guide too. It's this bone right here on the upper part of the arm. Now, let's see. We've got the humeral head and the olecranon fossa. So the humeral head is right here. A lot of the bones, when you find like this round bulbousy part, a lot of them will have a name like humeral head, femoral head. It's just referencing that this kind of looks like, like your head, right? So ideally you would say the whole thing like, this is the humerus, so you would say humeral head. That's the whole name. But if you just said head, I would say I'll probably give you half points for that, if it were like on an exam or something. The next thing is this feature right here called the olecranon fossa. You can see here, this is a big hollowed out depression area. This is on the posterior part of the bone. So in anatomical position, this would be my right. So this is what it would look like in anatomical position. I would have to look at the back side of it to see that feature. And that'll help you side the bone. So you're gonna have to learn how to side these, whether it's like if I give you this bone and I say side this, you are determining is it from the left side of the body or the right side of the body. So this one is on the right. I can tell because the humeral head angles in towards the body. Hopefully that's intuitive to you. Hopefully it makes sense to you that this humeral head is not pointing out. We don't have a weird bulbousy thing sticking out of our arm, right? This is going into the joint. And then we would know, okay, well, that could be this way or this way. How do I really know if it's a left or a right? You want to look, that fossa needs to be on the posterior part. So let's say I thought, oh, humeral head is angling in. This could be my left. But now I'm looking, oh, there's that fossa on the anterior part, but we know it's a posterior feature. So I would know it's a right. You're probably thinking, what did she just say? Luckily, you get the chance to rewind and pause and hear me say it again. Moving on to the next one. Oh, I got another image. You can see actually a couple slides of images of my arm. You can see like the humerus. You can see part of the scapula. You can see that joint and how the humeral head is angled in, like into that joint. The next bone, the ulna. So this is the ulna right here. See, good background, the pink. This is the ulna. I always remembered because it kind of looks like a U. I'd be like, oh, U for ulna. So this is the ulna. This is one of the bones in the lower part of your arm, like your forearm. In fact, the other bone, which is like on the next slide, is the radius. These two bones, you can see they're kind of similar in size, a little bit different, shape, obviously, some different features. But these are the two bones in the lower part of your, in the lower part of your arm. So for the ulna, though, you will need to know the olecranon process. So you might be thinking, wait, we just heard that term. Correct. On the humerus, we have the olecranon fossa. The olecranon process, right here, of the ulna, those two things go together to make your elbow. So actually the process itself is your actual like elbow, but the elbow joint is the connection of those two things. So luckily, because the name is, they named it something similar, one is just the fossa, one is the process, this kind of gives you a clue like those two things are connected. And this is not always the case. Sometimes a feature will just be named something completely random, but oftentimes the name of it kind of tells you where it is, what it's doing, where it's located, what it's next to sometimes. I would say like 90+% of the time, the name will give you some kind of clue. And then the radial notch is another feature. So if you're looking at the humerus, you'll see, let me turn it this way, you can see there's kind of this nice rounded area, and suddenly there's kind of this notch kind of removed, right? So here it is right here. This little notch, let me get real close. This is the notch right here. And it's called the radial notch because that's actually where the radius like connects into, where they kind of situate next to each other. This feature will help you to determine if you're looking at a left or a right. So in the arm, in anatomical position, the radius is always lateral. Remember we talked about lateral is, imagine there's a midline, lateral is away from the midline, medial is towards the midline. So in the arm, the ulna is on the medial side of the arm, so like right here. And then the radius is on the lateral part of the arm, right here. So it's gonna be radius and then ulna. So if you're looking at this ulna and you're like, okay, here's the ulna, am I looking at a left or a right? Well, I know because of that radial notch, the radius is gonna set right here next to it. If I think that's maybe a left and now suddenly like, but the radius is sitting right here, well then that would put the ulna in the lateral position, and I know that's not correct. So I could try on my right arm and say, okay, I'm looking, I think this is my right, well the radius would kind of come up on this side, that would mean it would be in the lateral position, which I know is the correct position, so this must be a right ulna. Now I know you're still thinking, okay, I know I can pause it and go back, but I'm still kind of not understanding what she's saying. When we get into the lab, I can also give you guys another demonstration. As you're walking through, as you're identifying stuff, I can point these things out to you again. You're gonna get to see these things close up. It's gonna make a lot more sense to you. The next feature, the next bone, the radius, just like we were talking about the radius, here it is. And you can see this is the one that at the top has this very circular part. That's the radial head. And then the other feature that you need to know is the radial tuberosity, So on this bone, you can see it's pretty smooth, except for this kind of rough raised area right here. Rough raised area, radial tuberosity. So this is actually an area where it's connecting to the ulna. These are connecting at that point. And also, let me see if I can give you some, I don't want to give you too many features, but I'm thinking now, I don't want to waste the video time, but now I'm thinking I might rethink if I have you side this one. This one's a little tricky. Let's just say that for now. I'll say you don't need to know how to side this one. So radial head and radial tuberosity would be fine. Typically you can use the radial tuberosity to side it, but it can be a little trickier, so I'll just leave this one off the list for siding. I'll probably just try to give you the obvious ones, like the femur and stuff like that, right? That's fine. Okay, and then let's see, next slide, the wrist and the hands. So here we have, we've got this, the wrist and the hand, a bunch of different bones, right? You can see all of the little bones of the wrist. Your wrist is actually in the bottom part of your hand, not in like what we typically think is like the wrist. It's actually in the bottom part of your hand. So you can see here, the wrist bones, all the bones of all the bones of the hand, the carpal, I had to think, the carpals, like the metacarpals, all of that, the phalanges, So you don't need to know all of that, right? I have an image on the PowerPoint so you can see the difference, but you do not need to know that for this class. The only thing I want you to know, if you see this out on display or there's a question on the exam about this, you know there's only one thing I'm going to ask you, and that is, what is this area of bones called? What is this section or region of bones called? And you would know I'm talking about the carpal bones, carpal bones. That's it. That's the only thing that I would want you to know from this. If you were taking an advanced course, you could get into like the little details of all the bones. You'd have to know all the names of these individual bones, but not for this class. That's fine. The next slide just kind of shows you a close-up of what they look like. And then now moving on to those two bones, the pectoral girdle. Remember, pectoral girdle is a reference to the function. It's not the name of a bone. The two bones that make up the pectoral girdle are the scapula, like your shoulder blade, and then your clavicle, like this bone right here in the front, right? So we'll go through both of those. Let's see. The first one is the clavicle. Hold on. Blow my nose off screen. Here's the clavicle. This is what it looks like. It kind of sets in your body a little more flat, but you can see it's kind of like an elongated S. You do not need to know any features of this. There are quite a few. You can see all the little divots, all the little things protruding, all the little lines. You do not need to know any of that for this class. You just need to know the name of this bone. So if I had this bone out and I said identify the bone, you would know I'm looking at a clavicle, the clavicle. So this is, this bone right here, right? There's a way, you can cite this. I will not have you cite this one for this class. It's kind of a trickier one too. Like I said, if you were taking an advanced course, you would learn, am I looking at a left or a right? And you could see on the image on the PowerPoint where this sets like in the body of that individual. The next bone, the scapula. So there are two features that I want you to know for the scapula. The first is what's called the scapular spine. So that is this feature right here. So when you're actually feeling your back and you're like, oh, I can feel that bone, you're actually feeling this particular feature. So this feature is on the posterior side, right? We can see on this individual right here, you can see it's right here, right? That's the scapular spine, the scapular spine. And if I rotate this bone, you can kind of see what that looks like. So it's this feature right here, scapular spine. The other feature that I want you to know is the glenoid fossa. And in fact, I had a sticker there tagged from something, probably from last semester. The glenoid fossa. Remember, a fossa is like a depression or a hollowed out area. It can be really deep. It can be kind of superficial. Like this one's a little more superficial. But this is where, let me see, the humerus is coming up and connecting right here. So you can see how those kind of fit together, right? The glenoid fossa of the scapula, the humeral head of the humerus. They're connecting to create that shoulder joint. Let's see, and then on the next slide you can see, kind of a top-down view of my shoulder, the connection between part of the scapula and part of the clavicle. So they do meet, so your clavicle is right here, kind of comes up like this, your scapula's in the back, they do actually connect on the top a little bit, and then your humerus kind of sets in right underneath them. So moving on to the next slide, now we're going to talk about the lower limb or the leg. Once again, some kind of general sections. We've got the thigh. There's one bone in that area of the leg. It's the femur. Most of the time, students are familiar with what the femur is. Then you have the lower leg, which consists of the tibia and the fibula. Do not get these two confused. If you said, oh, that bone is called the tibula, I'm not going to know which one you're referencing, right? So tibia and fibula. And then the patella, so the kneecap, we'll talk about that briefly, and then the ankle and the foot. So we can go through these. Next slide, we're going to get right into the femur. Let me see, where's my femur? You guys can just see me. You can't see like on the table I have right here, like I've got all the bones and I've got like my computer equipment and everything, so it's like, I'm like, where's the femur? Okay, so here, so you can see this is big bone, right? So this is the bone that's in the upper part of your leg, your thigh. It's the biggest bone in the body. It's pretty big. So we have the femur. This one is really easy to side because hopefully it makes sense to you that this part here is angling in toward your body, not outside your body, right? Like you don't have a weird kind of bulbousy thing sticking out of your hip, right? This is angling in toward the body, not away from. So that can help you side. You're like, okay, this is angling in this way and or it's angling this way. So how do you kind of determine that? So some of these other features we'll talk about. Let's go through them. So the 4 features that I want you to know: femoral head, once again, the area that kind of looks like a head, femoral head, angling in towards the body. That's going to be helpful in sighting. And then the greater trochanter. So if you're looking at the posterior part of the bone, you will see the greater trochanter. So here we have the posterior part. It is this kind of large, protruding, kind of chunky area, a little lateral and a little inferior to the femoral head right here. This is in the back of the bone. So you would know, okay, I want this bone to angle in towards the body, and then this feature should be in the back. I know I'm looking at a right femur. The other 2 features are the lateral and medial condyles. We will come back to these features when we talk about bipedalism. So here we have on the distal portion of the bone, so the area of the bone that's further away from the trunk of the body, so this is near the knee, we have these 2 bulbousy parts right here. These are both the condyles. The medial condyle is always bigger. This is important. We're going to talk about this later. But if you're looking, like you could have just this fragment of bone, so you didn't see the rest of the bone, you just saw this part of the bone, you can still determine if you're looking at a right or a left. So the medial condyle is always bigger. Hopefully you can see like this area here is much larger than like this area right here, right? Medial condyle is always larger. And you can see these curve like this, and they curve, let me see it here, it curves towards the back. So that's going to be clear. This is curving towards the back. So the anterior part of the bone versus the posterior part of the bone look quite different, right? Let's see, the next bone is the tibia. So this is the bigger of the 2 bones in the lower part of the leg. In the arm, they're kind of like the same. In the lower part of the arm, right, they're kind of similar, but in the lower part of the leg, you have one that's kind of big and one that's really skinny. So this one is called the tibia. I always remembered it because it's T, like it looks like a T, like T for tibia, right? So this is in the lower part of your leg. And there are a few features that I want you to know. The first one is called the tibial tuberosity. Tibial tuberosity is right here. Now you can, on your own leg, I don't think I can reach my leg up to the screen right now, but right below your knee, on like your leg, you will feel this kind of rough, rugged area, kind of right below your knee. That is the tibial tuberosity. And now that you know where it is on your body, you're like, oh, that's on the anterior part of my leg or the front part of my leg, not the back. So that will help you in sighting. Like you're like, this is like this in my body, not like this, right? This is the anterior part. I can feel that on myself, the tibial tuberosity. The next feature is called the medial malleolus. We're looking at the distal portion of the bone. It is this little feature right here. This is actually your ankle on the inner part of your leg, or the medial part. So you can see, you can feel like, oh, I have an ankle. We call the little bulbousy part the ankle on the outside or the inside of the foot, right? So this would be the one that's on the inside. This is on the medial part. Hence the name medial malleolus. Like I said, a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times the name of the bone will give you a clue as to where it is, what it's doing, maybe what it's connected to, like something like that. And then the next feature is called the anterior crest. So that is just this kind of linear, skinny, kind of sharp, not sharp, but like, you know what I mean, like sharp edge. You can kind of see from the side, this sharp edge to the very front, hence it's called the anterior crest. So you would know, okay, anterior crest is anterior, So is the tibial tuberosity. Those are both in the front of the bone, and that'll help me in sighting it, putting it in the right position, at least this way, and then that medial malleolus will guide you the rest of the way for sighting this bone. Let's see. And then the next bone is the fibula. So this one's really easy. You don't need to know any of the features of this bone. You just need to be able to identify this bone. It's the only one that's kind of long and skinny. Both ends kind of look fairly similar. The fibula. You just need to know the name of this bone. This bone, as you can see on the image, is always lateral in the leg to the tibia. Fibula is lateral. So fibula is on the outside of the leg. The tibia is on the medial part or the inside of the leg. Sorry, hold on. Of course, my computer decided to do something weird. Okay, it's fine. The next bone is the patella. Here I've got the patella. So this is your kneecap, right? Most of us are familiar with what this looks like. So here is one, the patella. You can actually sight this bone really easily. So here you can see, you don't need to know, I'm not gonna make you know any of the names of these features. There are a few different areas of this bone where there's some features, right? You do not need to know the names of the bone, the names of those features. But if you look at this bone, you will see there's one part that kind of comes to a point right here. We call that the apex. You do not need to know that name, but just remember that it's the pointy part. If you take this bone and lay it flat in front of you with the apex pointing away from you, it will either fall to the left or it will fall to the right. And you'll know, oh, if it falls to the left, I'm looking at a left patella. If it falls to the right, I'm looking at a right patella. I'll demonstrate this one in class, but this is always a fun, easy one to be able to side, the patella. The next bone or area are the tarsals. Now, similar to the hand, in the foot, here's what the foot looks like. There's a lot of bones here, tarsals, metatarsals, all of these bones, they all have different names, right? The only thing you need to know is if I have the foot out as part of a quiz or an exam, and I reference this area of bones, you know that I'm asking about the tarsals. In the hand, it's the carpals. In the foot, it's the tarsals. So the only question I would ask you if you saw this out, I would say, what is the name of these bones together? This region of bones. What are they called? Tarsals. And then on the next slide, actually the next two slides, you can see some X-ray images of my foot. Pretty cool. I've had a lot of stuff X-rayed, a lot of MRIs, a lot of stuff over the years, right? Moving on to the pelvic girdle. So remember, the girdle, that's not the name of a bone. That is just referencing a function of what some bones might do. So up here we had the pectoral girdle, the scapula and the clavicle have a function together to attach the arm to the axial skeleton. In the lower part of the leg, the pelvis serves as that same thing. So the left and the right pelvis, or os coxa, that's the name, the os coxa, left or right. But what is their function in terms of the pelvic girdle, that's when we would use that term. They connect the bones of the legs, they connect the leg to the main trunk of your body, right? So here we have, I think I have a left and a right. You can see here, we got a left and a right. The sacrum would be in the back right here, but this is basically in the front or the anterior portion of the pelvis, what it would look like. Now this is a female, and we will have a whole other lecture where we talk about male versus female, and we will have some great examples in class to talk about. But here we can see we've got the left and the right. Now, for whatever reason, this bone is always one of the most difficult for the students. They find it to be like, you're like, okay, wait, what am I'm not, like, this is a weird shaped bone, right? Look at it. It's like, what do I do? Is it this way? Is it this way? Am I doing it this way? I can see how it can kind of get confusing. To me, it just seems intuitive, but I've looked at, like, 500 of these over the course of like over a decade, right? So I get that it might take you some time to be like, okay, orient it. You know, there are a couple things that can help you put it in the right position. This large hole right here, it's called the obturator. It's called the obturator foramen, not operator foreman. I don't know how many times that happens. I'll have students call it the operator foreman. Ob with a B, obturator foramen. Remember, foramen is a hole. That is on the anterior part of this. This is not in the back. This is in the very front part of the body where the pelvis, where the left and the right sides meet. In the very front, you will see this large hole. So that'll help you. And here in this large, fossa area is where the femur comes up and connects. So hopefully that'll also help you. Like when I see that large hole, I know that's where the femur connects, and that kind of comes in on the side of the pelvis, not like in the back. Like your leg doesn't attach in the back of your pelvis, right? It attaches on the side, so that's going to help you. Okay, so been looking at this, it's also important to know that while we would say, oh, this bone is called the os coxa, like that's the name of the bone, actually, of course, to make it like more complicated, right? There are actually 3 separate bones. Now, developmentally, like fetally, developmentally, and even in early life, these can actually be physically separate. They then fuse together. Typically, when bones do that, we don't really reference them as different bones, with only a couple of exceptions, this one being one of those exceptions, because this bone is a very complex bone with a bunch of different functions. So we still reference them as like 3 separate bones, right? So we've got the pubis, that's this bone right here. Hold it different. So the pubis, the ischium, this area right here, and then the ilium is this large flared flat part. Those are the 3 bones. They connect together. When they connect together, we call it one bone called the os coxa. But technically, it is 3 separate bones connected to each other. And you can see on the image the color difference of, let's see, I think it's on the following slide. Where is it? Oh, it's somewhere, I forget. Okay, but moving on to the next slide. We've got the pubis. So very specifically referencing just this bone right here. It kind of goes to like right here. It's really just this area right here. The pubis bone. This is right in the very front. There's a left and right. They connect like right here. Like, let me show you again. This is in the very front of the pelvis. They're connecting with each other just like that. That makes sense? This is the front of the pelvis, right? They're connecting right here. There's a little bit of cartilage right here, just a tiny bit. So what I want you to know for this is there's the pubic symphysis. So if you turn right where they were connecting, the pubic symphysis, it's right here. This is an area we will talk about again when talking about sex determination, and just like the female pelvis in general, and aging. This is important for aging, this area right here. So like I said, this is where the 2 left and right sides would connect. There's usually a little bit of cartilage there. If you were to turn and rotate them, you would see that inner part. It's kind of, about the size of like your thumbnail, or like your thumbprint. If you have a big thumb, it's right there. It's that area right there. I'm trying to get you guys to really see this, the thumbprint. Okay. Give me 1 second on my computer to just find something. Just to make sure. Okay, perfect. I'm always doing something in the background here. I got to make sure everything's lining up with each other. Okay. So pubic symphysis, and there are a couple of other things I think I would want you to know, but for the purposes of this class, I think I'm just going to leave it at just that one. I mean, you can imagine every little kind of crest or line or protruding part has a name, but I think, like I said, even as I'm going through this actively in the lecture, I'm thinking of ways that can make this a little bit easier for you. So, okay, we'll just leave it at that. And then let's see, the next slide goes into the ischium. So this part right here is the ischium. This is actually the part where when you sit down and you're like, oh my, I have a really bony butt. It's actually this, you're actually feeling this part. You sit right here on this part of your pelvis when you're sitting down. Like you're actually sitting on this part. So if you don't have a lot of cushion, it will actually, it will feel bony and very uncomfortable. Okay, so for the ischium, let's see. Really, there's probably just the one feature that I want you to know. It's really the ischial tuberosity, the feature I was just pointing to. So if I'm rotating this, you will see that this area is kind of rough and rugged looking, right? Whereas the rest of it kind of looks a little smoother. It is this whole part right here, this whole rounded, rough part right here is the ischial tuberosity. The ischial tuberosity. You're like, never before have I been so close to my teacher's face. And the lighting is terrible in here, of course, right? Okay. Ischial tuberosity. I'll say that's probably the one thing I want you to know. And as you're going through these last few slides, you will see from different angles, it's kind of trying to show you some of these features. And then the next, the ilium. So the third of the bones, the ilium right here. Let's see, I think I'll probably have you know probably two features. The greater sciatic notch. So this is the greater sciatic notch. Now in a female, this will be much larger. In a male, it tends to be much smaller. So we will come back to that feature again when we talk about sex determination. But this is in the lateral posterior part. So here is this, if I had this bone in anatomical position, like a little lower, right? So if I look in the back, this feature's in the back and kind of on the side. The greater sciatic notch, greater sciatic notch. The other feature is the iliac crest. So really just this whole kind of top area of the flat part. So like if you're looking in the mirror and you're looking at your pelvis, you can kind of maybe see your pelvis like, under your skin. You are seeing this exact part. This is the line, that kind of line you're seeing is this part of the bone, the iliac crest. Moving along. And now it's showing you on the images on the PowerPoint when these three come together, some of the features that it can create, either two or three of these bones together. So when the pubis and the ischium connect, you get this feature, right? You get that obturator foramen. When all three connect, the pubis, the ischium, the ilium, they all connect and create the acetabulum. Sorry, I had to think about that. The acetabulum. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, you kind of referenced that as a fossa earlier. Well, it technically is a fossa. Like if you call that a fossa, you are completely correct. It's just the name we call it is the acetabulum. We could call it the acetabulum fossa, but no one really does that, right? So if you were to write that on the exam, I would not mark you off, right? It is a fossa. It is a deep hollow depression. It's just the term we use, usually we just don't say it that way, so it's acetabulum. Let's see, where are we at in time? Okay, I think we're almost done with this one. Let's see, then the next slide is, that's kind of just what I said. Yeah, the obturator foramen and then the acetabulum. Okay, cool. So that wraps up the appendicular. That's a lot, right? I did it in 30 minutes. Usually that lecture in class takes over an hour because I go through very meticulously every single little thing and I talk to each student about it. Now, we will get a chance in the lab to do that. So this is why it's ideal that you watch these lectures beforehand. So you're like, okay, I'm kind of familiar with the terms. She's pointed out a couple things on the bones. I have a general idea of what I'm about to look at. And then when we get into the lab, it's not a complete mystery. You're like, oh, okay, that was the femur, that was the radius. It's all kind of coming back to me. And so when we jump into like a worksheet, you're not going to be completely lost, right? With this hands-on stuff, this is all, I'm showing you bone after bone after bone, right? This is all going to be very great and hands-on in class. So you have this is usually the section the students find the most difficult because there's a lot of terms, but typically the most fun because you get to play with all the bones, right? Play with all the bones. Okay, so right around 30-ish minutes, so cool. So I'll see you guys in the next one.